Happy Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Tropical MBA podcast. Today, I had a really fascinating discussion with Neel Parekh. He is the founder of MaidThis, which is, we call it like a remote local business. He's currently living in Rwanda, going on all these adventures, but he makes money by delivering cleaning services in Los Angeles. So super cool, but he took it to the next level, which is he franchised that model out to others. So we're going to talk about how he did this. One of the things that came out that was really interesting in the conversation is because he sells his model as an opportunity to aspiring entrepreneurs, he has a very strong perspective on how long it takes to see different types of financial success in business. As you know, this is something I'm super interested in because I like to, break things down. Like my most popular internet post of all time was, well, how long does it take to play simple chords on the guitar? And it's one thing when it's like this ephemeral, oh my gosh, I got to change my identity to become a guitarist. I have to learn all this complicated scales and modes and stuff. It's like, well, yeah, but how many hours are we talking here? And Neel really does a good job with this with entrepreneurship. And so we're going to start the conversation off there. We're also going to get into work-life balance stuff and this franchise model, how he runs this incredible remote local business, multi-seven figures from Africa, from Asia, from North America, wherever he happens to be. So without further ado, here is Neel Parekh. I'm wondering if you could reflect on the law of 1,000 hours a little bit and then talk about the dialectic, if you will, between hustle and life mix.
I love the concept of compression of time. And I think, as you get a little bit more involved in your business ownership life, you try to seek out those different ways of compressing time. For example, maybe earlier on in my 20s, I would have bought a course. Now I would just say, forget that. I just want to hire the guy for an hour for coaching, right? Requires more capital, but you realize it's going to pay itself back. I should have done this a long time ago.
100%.
So there's a lot of ways of compressing time. And like one way, so last May I did Everest Base Camp with my wife. So we went to Everest, hiked up there, at least to the base camp. So when you do that though, you hire a Sherpa, right? That's the easiest way because the Sherpa could say, go up this path, don't do this, negotiate rates at tea houses, like they know what they're doing, right? So you would never do that alone. You would always hire a Sherpa. If I did it alone, it would have taken me twice the amount of time, right? But because we had a guy, Govinda, who is freaking awesome, he guided us the whole way there, negotiated everything for us, and took care of things. So one easy way of compression of time is you pay for a coach, you pay for a service, you pay for a course, you pay for something of someone who's already done it to compress time. That's number one.
I call it the $500 phone call. I just go to LinkedIn, go to Twitter, find the person who's actually done the exact thing. Forget about a consultant or a coach. Just find the person that works at a business that's done it. And they're just sitting at their desk bored, and you're like, I will pay you $500 to talk to me. 8 times out of 10, they'll get on the phone with you. And that $500 is the best you'll spend because they're going to give you that 80% fresh start or quick start. And then you build a relationship in the process.
I always tell people this, obviously, with franchising too. Like when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. Like people would call me and I'd have my cleaners and they want money. So I'd be like, all right, let me hold up. I go to the ATM outside of my corporate building. They pull up in the car, hand them cash, like everyone sees me. They think I'm a drug dealer. Like I didn't know what I was doing at all. I had no concept of it, right? Now, if I just hired a Sherpa, I made that $500 phone call to someone who has a cleaning company and said, can you just tell me how I should do this? And they could have shortcutted it.
Yes.
I could have probably shaved off a couple years of my growth trajectory and trial and error, right? Now, you think about what we're doing right now in revenue. A couple years, and especially in profit, that's a lot of money. That's worth $500 phone calls, right?
Yes.
That's like the easiest way to compress time for sure. The other way would be 1,000-hour principle, which what I've kind of noticed with our franchises is the people who put the time, the actual time at the beginning, not just the money, but also the time at the beginning, they tend to just grow faster. And I was thinking about why is that the case? I can't just substitute the time for the money, or I can't just space out the time. And I've realized the time you put at the beginning of the business, it's not equal. That 1 hour you put at the beginning is not equal to that 1 hour you put in year 2. The time you put in at the foundational times, it actually helps compound it a lot faster.
Why is that?
I think I can only speak about it in terms of my model. like versus esoteric. So I'll tell you about the tactical part of it. It's a recurring revenue business model. You'd rather get that customer year 1 than year 3, right? And oftentimes the work you put in at the beginning is going to make you move faster. Why? Because you get that customer sooner, you get more Google reviews, you get more referrals, you get repeat clients, things just start stacking, right? So if you're like, hey, I want to replace my income, and I tell you, hey, it's going to take you 1,000 hours, and you say, I'm going to do it part-time, 2 hours a day after work, it's going to take you 500 days to do that versus the other guy who's doing it 8 hours a day, it's going to take him 125 days. So you're moving like 4 times faster.
Interesting.
Probably more than 4 times faster, because the more you do at the beginning, eventually, at least in our model, costs for acquisition go down to get a new customer because you have more credibility, you have more reviews, you can milk your old customer base. Like things just become easier the longer you're in business. So if I think about that, you might as well put the time at the beginning, because I'm telling you, it requires 1,000 hours of dedicated time.
Yeah.
Front load that baby, right? Because it's not linear. Business is not linear. Like if you front load it, it's going to hockey stick sooner. So why would you wait longer to hockey stick? Just front load the 1,000 hours. Now, there's kind of nuances, of course, with that, Dan. Like, I don't think you could use that for every single model, and everything you do is just try to outwork people. But I would say there are compound effects if you just put in the work earlier.
I think it's so fascinating that you can do that for your franchisees. And I think it's empowering in business because it's something we can sink our teeth into. We're not just, we know we can have some reliability that those hours are not going to be completely risked, that we're going to get something at the end of it. The other thing I thought of in terms of compressing time, forget about the $500 phone call. Just call your competition and make friends with them. I call it the red phone. You know, like America and Russia during the nuclear, like Cold War. Just call them up. Say, hey, you guys going to shoot us down today? I don't know. Feel them out a little bit. But you'll be surprised about how receptive your quote competition is to simply talking to you. In fact, when we were running the job board, called somebody with a whole network of amazing job boards and who had put a bunch of capital into it and was completely bare bones honest with us about the state of the industry, what he felt our prospects could be, shared his numbers with us. And all we did was just call a competitor. And part of it is like, well, are we really competition? No, it's a big space out there. And also, who else in the world is going to value this information? So there's a human component to sharing this unique and valuable information that there's only a handful of people in the world who understand how valuable it is. You can really make a difference in that conversation.
So the hard part for franchisees or anyone is like, even though you put in the hours, you compress time, you make the $500 phone call, it's hard to stay motivated if you don't see any visible signs of success. Right? Like there's like a form of like Chinese bamboo plant where you water it for 5 years and you don't see any sign of success. There's nothing that happens. But then finally when it grows at 3 feet per day. It's the fastest growing plant outside of this random form of kelp. It's kind of the same concept, right? Like you could water something and put in the hours, put in the work and not see any visible signs of success. How do you keep going? And how do you know when to stop? Right? Like it's a really hard decision. And I think for me, at least what I've noticed with franchising is the only way to help people keep going, if you know there's no business model risk, is going to be accountability and community. Like that's the other big part of it is, you know, it's going to work because there's no business model risk. Now, how do you stay motivated enough, especially if you see other people succeeding, if you see other people doing it and you think, why not me? Like, why is this not working for me? You've put in, like Neel told me to put in 1,000 hours. I did. I made these phone calls. I put in the $500 phone calls. Why is this not working? You have to have the accountability there too.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Yeah. Coaches. Like I've had and I'm a solo founder. I don't have a business partner. So I've been with mastermind groups and coaches since 2016. And always, I think it's the only way. And truthfully, like I think 2021 or 2022 we're franchising, and for a couple years at that point, the first year we had 1 franchise. The second year we had another one, so only 2. And I see all these people selling remote cleaning courses, crushing it, like all these people doing it. And I think I've grinded so much. I have 2 franchisees to show for this. And I was about to shut down Trip. I was about to say, we had new franchisees who wanted to start. I was about to tell them, like, hey guys, I'm not going to do this anymore. You know, don't pay me. And then I brought it to my mastermind group at the time because I had a mastermind group and a coach. And they were like, bro, what are you talking about? Like, you've already done this hard work. you could reverse it and try to do something else. It's going to take another couple years. Like you have good stuff. It works. Just keep at it. So finally I was like, okay, I'll continue this for another 3 months. Let me see how it goes. And we signed 8 franchisees that year. And now we're at 30, right?
What changed?
Time. I was doing the right stuff. It just wasn't working. I put in the hours. I didn't see the results yet. And I kept comparing myself to other people who were growing way faster than me. And I thought, why? I guess I'm not made for this. I picked the wrong model. I picked something too hard. Like, why am I doing this? It was just a matter of time and letting it nurture.
What do you think was nurtured though? Because I do think it's interesting to compare this. We're talking about remote local business model and agency model. You're like a landing page and some conversations away from not having to let it nurture. So there's less risk. Now you incur all these legal fees, all the branding stuff, hundreds of thousands of dollars to build up the franchise model to get certified and everything. You took on a big risk. So now you're at the bonsai tree. And that's the next step. Like when you talk about like hustling and like how reliable that leads to outcomes, I suspect that like me and you, we can sit here and say, well, yeah, you can build a 7-figure business in three years easy. You just got to, do this stuff. I suspect it's similar at higher scale levels. It's just less clear what to do. You can hustle, but then there's still this bonsai element, which some opportunities take time. You can't redesign a 747 in 6 months. You have to go through protocol. And so anyway, I'm curious as to like what did mature in your view, if you had to guess.
On a personal level, I think it was just confidence that the model works. And when you feel confident because you have enough case studies and you've proven this out, you could sell more reliably. I know without a doubt right now, yes, it works. Our support system is the best because we've invested so much into it. I've seen what's out there and we've done it enough times. Like I have so much confidence in the system now. When you're first starting, you might not have that. The other part of it is like franchising's high ticket sales, right? That's kind of what it is. What I've realized and what I'm doing online right now is a lot of personal branding, right? The way to decrease the sales cycle and make people trust you more is personal branding. That's what's been working for us, right? Normally in franchising, people sell through franchise brokers. We haven't used a single broker at all. Don't need to, right? We have enough leads coming from online sources because you develop trust online. People see you enough times. They finally inquire. They see your podcast. They know you before they even talk to you.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't have a personal brand when I started. It takes some time to build that up. It takes time to have people like find you online in random places. So the lead volume was probably the biggest thing which changed. Like all of a sudden we're getting more reliable leads. My Twitter presence grew and I was able to crack that algorithm code a little bit until Elon took over. Like things started happening just more reliably. Then I had more leads coming in, vetted them, onboard them, more success case studies, and then the flywheel starts. But that inertia part at the beginning, man, especially when you're comparing yourself to others, it kills you, right? It's really tough.
We talked about in the last episode, like comparison, aside from being like a thief of happiness and out of your scope of control, what other people are doing, it's also hard to really know what the true story is behind the story. One of the things I noticed, that's one of the cool things about you coming on here, being transparent, but when you dig into what it actually took, my kind of thought is like, if you can take the law of 1,000 hours and apply it to the person you're comparing it to, well, now we're getting towards a little bit more of a useful benchmark when we can, rather than just have it be an exciting narrative, like a sexy thing to emulate or to strive for, it's like, can you break down what the course creator did? Can you talk to them? Can you do the $500 phone call? Can you red phone? And I think this is what separates, elite founders from people who are opportunists is show me a spreadsheet where what your best hypothesis is, where those hours went, what the level of resource was, what the level of capital was, what the level of expertise was, and what is your competitive, like posture towards all those things. And I do think you can really break this stuff down versus simply saying, look at so-and-so crushing it. There's those 1,000 days out there and they were real. The question
Yeah.
is, can you get an accurate picture of what they were? And it seems to me that that's exactly what you're doing with your franchise model is you're saying, these are the 1,000 hours and I'm going to help you get through them fast to base camp.
Yeah, essentially that. And, it's interesting, Danny, because now that, those 2022, I was considering shutting the franchise down. I look back at a lot of the people I was jealous of comparing, saying like, why didn't I just do that? That seems a lot easier. They're either not in business or they're not really doing that well. And it's interesting because it kind of goes back to like the Chinese bamboo plant we talked about. Like a lot of this is building the proper foundations. Like, weeds grow really fast. They do, but they're not going to survive a storm, but they're not going to survive long term. A Chinese bamboo plant, you don't see the roots for a very long time, but the roots are really, really deep and is very strong, right? That doesn't always mean like, oh, just put in more hours and guaranteed the foundation is going to be strong. You got to do the right stuff. But generally what I've seen, especially because I've been doing this long enough now, the people who grow really, really fast, many times that also means the foundation isn't as strong.
That's a great point. Obviously, it's not as rosy. I was just thinking of two examples in my head where, you'd ask 10 out of 10 people that are online watchers and you say this person's crushing it. And for sure, it's like the worst year ever for them, which is interesting. And that happens. So it's worth figuring out, how, if you're going to emulate something, if you're going to be inspired by something, taking it to that next level and like calling up somebody who knows them and saying like, hey, I know you're crushing it or whatever. Could you tell me the real thing? Can you show me some numbers? Like, I'm inspired by you. See what they say. They might just break honest with you. And then on the contrary, like a lot of brands that are pretty quiet, it's like the confident person in the corner at the party. Like they've got their stuff together. They don't need to be loud about it. We both know businesses that are just absolutely destroying it, but maybe they're just a little quieter about it. You're not hearing about it as much.
Definitely. It's also interesting, like with probably people listening to this podcast, people in the DC who are more lifestyle driven and talking about that and this whole concept. And like, I bring this up because I kind of battled with this as well. Like when building this business, of the common questions I think a lot of people who are lifestyle entrepreneurs would think about is, why am I doing this big thing if I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur? If I do this big thing and put these hustle hours, that means I'm not enjoying life. That means I'm not enjoying travel. That means I'm not chilling out. And, why am I doing this big thing? I think for me, that was like a common question to battle with for a long time. And I probably shot myself in the foot with growing because I thought if I grew, I'm no longer a lifestyle entrepreneur and I'm going to have to work and my life's going to suck and this is going to be bad. I think people who are like in the venture capital game and like, they don't think these thoughts because they're not optimizing for lifestyle. They're optimizing for, I want $1 billion exit. So it's interesting for me kind of going through that and kind of what I've realized now, and I'm just sharing it because I think this is probably something a lot of people in our community probably go through, is the bigger the business got, the more lifestyle freedom I got, oddly. It's kind of what I found. It's completely counterintuitive. I did not think that would be the case. I thought I'd be in meetings all the time and my life would suck and I have this big enterprise and, I'd get old and I'd just be working and regret it. But yeah, it's so funny. Like the bigger I got, the more freedom I got.
I think you're 100% right. I'm again thinking about all the folks that I know. The bigger businesses give the founders the most time. What are some of the reasons for that?
Number one, you could hire smart people. It's by far number one. Because now you could afford to hire a really solid general manager and make sure they're compensated well. Or you can hire team members, maybe like, let's say in the US and you hire some really, really sharp people instead of saying, hey, I'm going to only hire offshores because I need to save costs. There's things you could do and resources you have access to because you're getting bigger. And that's kind of what I've noticed versus if I stayed small, I'd be the only coach, right? Maybe we'd make a lot of profit, and I have more flexibility, but I'd be the only coach. I'd be the smartest one in the room. I'd be the go-to person for every single problem. There's just, there's less freedom in that, right? When you're running a smaller enterprise. I didn't realize that, right? Because for all these years I was backpacking, I was the guy that everyone was going to. And I was like, oh, this is fine. I'm traveling. Let me just do this forever. And now that I've had kind of a bigger enterprise and I have my LA business mostly automated, I'm like, damn, I should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah. I was just speaking with a client who recently hired a GM for an agency that anybody listening to this right now could conceptualize it. It's not some fancy startup or whatever. It's, doing multi-million dollars a year in revenue, just one foot in front of the other, getting clients, serving them well, making profit. And this person makes, couple $100,000+ a year. And guess what? They know how to run the business better than they do because they're smart and they've done it. And so there's a lot of people in the world that know how to run your business better than you know how to run your business. It's just that they're typically going to be expensive. That's it. And I think that's basically why a scale brings lifestyle ease, because of strong leaders that are on your team.
Yeah. And I don't even mean like you hiring a 6-figure MBA who's going to come in. Like, you don't even need to do that. But like your A-level team members, you could pay them more. Now you could afford to pay them more and you could optimize for that. And you could let go of the cheaper B-level people and bring in all A team members. And they could still be overseas. They don't have to be like these super executives, but now you could afford to pay them a lot and keep them happy and keep them around. And that's a big deal.
So talk to me about who comes to your door, what they're looking for, and what the pitch is.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, it's funny because like getting into franchising, I never wanted to. I was like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur. Like, that's what my parents do, franchising. Like, why would I do that? I'm going to do some cool stuff like e-commerce. I don't know. So then I ended up just getting into it. I'll explain why, but like, I wouldn't say in a win, but it was like a coin toss essentially. And now I'm diving into it. I kind of battle with those like lifestyle entrepreneur, bootstrapper tendencies and identity versus like what a franchise business actually needs, which is much more formalized and large scale. And it's kind of like been definitely a learning curve. I've been doing that for about 4 years now. But it's interesting just to kind of combine the two, right?
Yeah.
And at some points they're at odds and at some points they're not. And at some points I thought they were odds, but they're actually not. Something cool to get into it. Anyways, yeah, to your question. So cost. So we're a maid service company focused on Airbnbs and residential homes and kind of some small commercial jobs as well. So let's say someone says, hey, Neel, I want to open up a MaidThis in my market. You're in LA, you're doing well. Can I just copy everything? That's essentially what the franchise is, right? So our most recent franchise, who's funny enough, a DC actually, is in Chattanooga in Tennessee. And they opened up, it's a husband and wife couple, they opened up a MaidThis over there, meaning we set up all the tech stuff and it's fully remote, like an old school cleaning company, Dan. Cars, vehicles, wraps, all the cleaners go to an office space in the morning. You send them out and, you have a supply room of all these supplies. That's like what most franchises, which are maid service, operate as. And that's what, in my opinion, old school cleaning companies operate as. I started my business in 2013, so it's been a while, as a remote concept because, like, go figure, I wanted a lifestyle business. I wanted to go travel, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people who buy the franchise, it's not that they want to travel, but they don't want all this insane overhead. Right. So what we do is a pretty lean model. Cleaners go straight from their home to the job site. So the franchisees, what they're getting is the training. We do the tech stuff. We handle probably half of the marketing for them. Then it's almost like a high ticket coaching program inside. Right. So there's a Slack community with other franchisees. There's pod groups. There's masterminds. There's coaches. And then we just help walk them through the exact playbook of how to start their own fully remote maid service in their city.
I think the interesting thing for me is that like you're able to value the guidance portion of it. So what's that look like?
Currently, the initial fee is $39,000. It's going to go up to $45,000 in a couple months. The royalties 6% of revenue, and then there's a couple other smaller fees, which are mostly for shared expenses. We have a monthly marketing package, which is paid to us. And here's like an example of the benefit of a franchise. When I was doing SEO just for my own location, it was probably around $1,500 a month. With our monthly market package, it's way less than that because we could centralize it and go to the vendor and say, dude, we got 30 locations, give us a better rate. It's all the same website, right? So like a lot of these costs kind of get really condensed. So that's what a lot of the shared overhead we're doing is just to get that group purchasing rate. So there's a minor tech fee, a minor marketing package. But the biggest thing to think about is that initial fee and that 6% royalty.
So it sounds like a gravy train. This is great. You get to be a coach. You get to use like your sandbox, like your initial locations as the model for your franchisees to follow. You get the 6% royalty. You get the cash bump up front. But you mentioned it's a little counterproductive to lifestyle sometimes. So what's the rub there?
I was literally just writing a Twitter thread on this about franchising. I didn't know this getting into franchising of how expensive franchising is to run. Everyone sees like, oh, you get like a fat initial fee, you get royalties. This is great. You just do a little bit of support and you go. It's not really how it goes. There's a lot of overhead, especially when it comes to the internal staff. Every state we're in, we have to get registered in, which means legal costs. Then there's tons of regulations. There's a ton of overhead. So there's a concept in franchising called royalty break-even. At what point do your royalties pay for your overhead, right? That number doesn't come for a while. We're not even at that number right now because you need the franchisees to grow.
It's similar to like a fund, an administration fee in a fund. You need to get a certain amount of LPs in order to...
Pretty much. And you have to wait for the fund to grow, right? Because like if the franchisees are all very small, you're not getting much royalty, right? So you're over-servicing them for the amount you're getting paid on the royalty, which is fine because you're in it for the long run, right?
Right.
And that's why we're kind of like, we bet on the franchisees who are coming in. And there's some franchise systems who say, hey, we mostly care about the initial fee. Let anyone in. Like, let's go, right? And, eventually those systems kind of get screwed because of a lot of unhappy franchisees in who are not performing. And it's protected territory, meaning you typically can't resell it. We're not like that, right? Because I know the long-term growth is going to be on betting on the franchisees. So initial fees kind of just cover costs and operating expenses and fund some parts of growth. But the real money will happen on the royalties, which is not anytime soon. Now, Dan, if you ask like a lifestyle entrepreneur in the DC, hey, you're not going to make money for years if you get into this business model, what would they say?
Hell no.
Hell no. I would absolutely not do that. If you told me that 4 years ago when I started, I'd be like, I'm not doing this, right? And a stat I just heard at the conference, which now makes a lot of sense, is they say it takes $2 to $2.5 million to create a national brand. $2 to $2.5 million. So it's just like, I didn't know what I was stepping into at the beginning. Currently, like, I love it. Like, it's so fun because you actually get to help aspiring entrepreneurs get into a business, which I know works, and, provide a support system. It's completely different from what I was doing before, so I love it. But it is not a quick cash business like a lot of people might think. It's really a long-term play.
I mean, if you would imagine comparing the franchise model to you opening up those locations yourself, how did you do that math in your head?
2018, I was at the DC conference in Bangkok, and that was the year, you remember Adam Anderson?
Mm-hmm.
He spoke at the conference. Yeah. So I met him at the conference, and then we were talking about expanding the business. And at first I was like, okay, well, I'm trying to figure out what I could do. There's two models I could think of. Starbucks owns all their locations. That's just self-expansion. Or the McDonald's model. McDonald's is a franchise model. And I was talking through with Adam, and he's like, hey, I think you should just really look into franchising. And at first I wasn't considering that at all. I just thought I'd self-expand. And as I started looking into it, talking to consultants, I realized, okay, maybe this is an interesting, more unique way to expand because there are headaches that come with running your own operation. Let's say I wanted to go from 0 to 100 maid service locations myself, right? Now that's a different level of management because you need general managers in each location. There's overhead involved with that, with hiring people. There's a lot of capital going into developing any location. That's the hard part, right? So, we were in a couple of cities, but thinking about expanding across the nation, that felt daunting with a lot of capital too. The beauty is you get all the profit, right? Because all the profit margin goes to you. But it just felt like such a big task. And I knew like, there's no way I'd be able to get to, let's say 100 locations. Like maybe I'll expand to like 5, maybe 10. But at the end, I'd probably be capped just in terms of my mental capabilities at the time. So I decided, let's give this franchise thing a shot. It seems easy. You collect an initial fee, give some coaching, get some royalty. This seems sweet. I could still maintain my lifestyle, do what I want. So I just kind of got started and started learning as I go. And I think most times, if you're ignorant about what you're getting into, oftentimes that's kind of good because you don't know what's coming up, and so you don't think about it. And that's kind of what happened. Is I just kept going and started learning things along the way. Obviously, it's a huge endeavor. It's something bigger than I thought I would ever get into, but now that I'm actually in it, I'm like, you know what? I could actually still have my lifestyle and potentially develop a really big business. And it's kind of cool to have both aspects.
give us a picture of the business. Like who works there? What's the revenue? How many locations? All that.
I'll talk about my LA unit. That's my what we call it corporate owned location now. That's what's called in the franchise world. So my corporate owned location in Los Angeles. That business does around 1.5 million in revenue. I have a general manager in place now who's managing most of it, so I spend pretty minimal hours there. That team, the internal team, not including the cleaners, is probably around 6 people. So general manager, a couple people in operations, a couple people in sales, a couple floaters, things like that. That's mostly the team, and then of course the cleaners on top of that. That's my location, and that's also what franchisees are working towards, that type of thing. On the franchise side, I have about 8 people, a couple business coaches, a couple people on tech support, a couple people on marketing, a couple people on sales. So yeah, right about 8 to 9 people who are on staff for that business. And then in terms of revenue, it kind of depends what you count as revenue, but that'd be, probably about right around $1 million or so, is kind of where we're going to be ending up.
Tell me about like a few of the top performing locations. Who are the people that want to do this? And how are you vetting them?
So we've had almost 4,000 people apply so far, right?
Okay. Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's got to be tempting. The conversion rate on 40 grand on 4,000 applications. It's got to be tempting. Why didn't you just rip it on that?
I could have made millions by selling to people who were handing me a check. I've turned so many people down.
Why?
Because I know the money's on the royalty, and I don't want to work with people I don't like. I'd rather support the people who are motivated, who are hungry, who want it, and who I feel like I would bet on that person, And that's kind of what we're building. There's a lot of support, though, that also goes into the franchise system. So when someone gets in, it's 8 weeks of MaidThis University training. Then when they're actually in the system, they're following the exact playbook. There's an ops manual. There's a lot of kind of like support that we give to the franchisees.
Yeah.
So for everyone who comes in, I also have to think, what's my team's capacity for actually giving them a high level coaching? And the last thing I want is to be one of those franchises, and there's a lot of them, who oversell. Franchisees are under-supported, and then they just exit a private equity and call it a day. You know what I mean? Like there's probably like 3 or 4 main characteristics I look for when I vet them. Number one, like do that, the hustle factor. Some people think I want to buy passive income. Like the most common question I'll ask is, hey, how much money do you need to quit your job? Everyone says $10,000 a month. Everyone. It's like, and I ask them, like, do you actually need $10,000 a month? They're like, no, but that makes me feel safe. You know what I mean? So a lot of people want to have zero risk when getting into business. And as you and I know, that's just not how it works. So you kind of have to vet one, like, okay, does this person have the risk tolerance and hustle to actually get involved in entrepreneurship? And then I often reference the 1,000-day program that you've often talked about, where that's how long it kind of takes to replace your day job. And that's oftentimes what I've seen myself as well.
Totally.
The second one would be expectations. We get a lot of people who are just discontent with their 9 to 5. And like the sad truth is a lot of them are really caught up in the golden handcuffs, and it's really tough to get away from that. I can't tell you how many doctors we have contact me and say, hey, Neel, I'm burnt out. I want in. And I say, okay, how much do you make? 500 grand a year. And you want to replace your income in 1 year? Yes. And you want to do it part-time? Yes. Okay. I don't think this is the fit for you, like, so expectation setting is a big part too. So hustle expectation setting. The other big part is culture. Are you going to be a cultural fit? We have a pretty strong community with the franchisees. We have a couple conferences every year. Everyone has the similar values. They support each other. And that's kind of what I want to build, like a proper community. And so having that capability of being with people and franchises you actually like and want to work with, I think is a huge part of why I like what I'm doing.
Do they need capital outside of the 40 grand they're giving you?
Yeah. So 50 to 70,000 all in is kind of what we say.
Okay.
That includes that initial fee. Most of the money after the initial fee is going to go towards their own marketing. It's a pretty lean business model. There's not like a crazy build out or overhead. It's going to be, some software and stuff you sign up for, and then market to get either customers or market to get cleaners. That's pretty much the whole model.
Now, I know you're into radical transparency. Take it as far as you want, but you've only been in the game for 4 years. Like, what is the difference between your projected outcomes and the actual returns so far? One of the things I think is so interesting about what you've done is you've created a on-ramp that is way more robust than Tropical MBA, for example, which is simply a 30-minute audio. Like, all the work's still ahead of you, but now you're saying, like, this is a way you can do it. Like, here is the complete toolkit. The question then is, like, if I look at the number of people who listen to this show, and then they all start a business or whatever, and the number of people who replace their income, it'd be hard for me to come up with an actual statistic of the success rate. I'm curious if you could help us out in people that take your path. Like, what is the success rate? What can they expect?
To date, as of right now, we've had 2 locations close. And I'll give you the exact reasons why. And I think part of the process for me has been honing in who's the exact ideal avatar for us and who I think could actually really, really succeed in the model. Now, here's what I love about the cleaning industry in general. This is an old school industry. We're not reinventing anything here. We're just doing it slightly better, right? If there's a cleaning company in your town which is being successful, you could probably do the exact same thing because things get dirty all the time. It's a repeat business. It's constant. AI is not going to disrupt it. Versus, let's say you're really evaluating this and it's a crumble cookie. You have to think, is this a fad? Is this going to go away? What's actually going to happen? What's the build out versus not? There's like, the business model risk is extremely low when it comes to a maid service, right? So if the business model risk is mostly gone, then you have to think about, okay, what's the other variable? The other variable is either going to be the territory or the franchisee, right? That's pretty much the 2 variables. So when we get into that, the territory, I know people who are in towns of like 30,000 population making over $1 million in the maid service business.
In sales or in profit?
Sales.
Okay. And what could you expect, like 20% margins for the owner or something like that?
Typically in cleaning industry, you're looking anywhere between 15 to 30%. It kind of depends how much the owner's involved or not involved, but
gotcha.
Generally you're going to be around that mark.
And these are all going to be owner operated for the first, let's call it 3 to 5 years, right?
I'd say the first couple of years at least, owner operated. Owner operated, by the way, does not mean they're cleaning. I don't want any of my franchisees cleaning, but they're in front of the computer. They could be wherever they want. Like right now I'm in Rwanda and I'm still helping operate my LA unit. But they need to be like full-time in the business generally. So for franchisees, if they are able to give the full-time effort and go into it, the success rates are extremely high. Now, Dan, I wish I had exact statistics for you around when can they replace their income and exact success rates. The truth is most franchisees are relatively young, meaning a year to 2 years in. So they're still kind of in that build phase. We are tracking the data of how long it takes them to get to, like, let's say 10K per month. How long till profitability, which varies depending on your marketing spend. We have like all the data internally because it's a franchise system of what are they spending on marketing per channel? How much is that costing? What's the cost per lead per channel? So like part of the reason, like what are they really buying? They're just mostly buying the coaching and intellectual property, kind of, but they're also buying the community, right? Like how much faster can you go if don't use Angie's List, but use Thumbtack. Here's how much you spend. Also, here's a vetted vendor for you. Also, here's what Neel messed up on and you don't have to mess up on, right? So like kind of what people are buying is less risk and just time collapsing. That's mostly what people are buying. So Dan, to your question exactly of like, what's the success rate for replacing income? I actually don't have the answer because I don't think we've got into that age with most of these units yet. We do have units, doing over $50,000 per month in in less than a couple years. So they're able to scale pretty fast. And I think the biggest variable is like, are they giving full-time effort? Are they devoting enough hustle into the business? And have they invested enough capital into marketing? If those 3 variables are yes, chances of success are extremely high because there's no business model risk.
It's fascinating. The fact that it's so reliable is remarkable. It's sort of against what a lot of us think of when we think of entrepreneurship. It reminds me a little bit of starting like an agency based on your expertise. If you pick the right topic to present your expertise, that's your like location variable. And then the other variable is like, does the founder work hard? And like, there's basically no risk at that point. Like that person will reliably be making the equivalent of a good salary with no risk. People talk about entrepreneurship as so risky, but there's these certain models that it's interesting just to hear you describe it like one foot in front of the other. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. There isn't large capital risks. Like, we are simply going out and doing it slightly better, and it works.
Typically in franchising, success rates are higher than if you're starting your own business. There's a couple reasons. Number one reason is you're copying a model which already works. Typically, you're following an exact system, and hopefully there's a lot of support behind you. And part of it is the person who buys in is buying in with real money, right? Like, these are not cheap. And if you imagine, like, Dan, if I said, hey, there's two guys, one guy invested $2,000 to start his business, the other guy invested $50,000, same business model. Who do you think is going to actually be more motivated? It's probably the guy who invested $50,000, right? So it's not that, you're buying in just to get yourself motivation, but the truth is most people who get into franchising, there's a system around you. It's a playbook. You simply have to follow it. It's already been done for you. And on top of that, you probably invested a good chunk of money where you want to see this through. This isn't like, I'll try it. Let's see if it works. If not, let me go do Amazon FBA.
If you take like a lot of the entrepreneurs that we know, when they look at a model like this, a lot of people are going to be super jacked about it. But then there's a whole other class of people that aren't into it. And I think part of the reason is when I look at a lot of your business ideas, we talk about these remote local businesses, as you call it, where I'm sitting behind a laptop, but we're doing services in local areas. And it's almost like too legible. Like, you can see all the work that you're going to have to do for the next 3 years. Like, I know I'm going to have to hustle community groups. I know I'm going to have to do local service ads. I know I'm going to have to build an operations team. And like, you can see it almost like you can see a job where there's like an element of entrepreneurship where you never know, man. Like, I could blow up. And there's like a little bit of that entrepreneurial gambler mentality that I think when people look at lists of remote local businesses, like people kind of say, man, I want something more exciting than that.
I think that's fair. Like, I think people who are like highly entrepreneurial, like they're doing 6 things at once. First of all, I would probably say don't join a franchise system. But I guess what I've liked about the model, what I've learned about remote local type business models is just the durability, which sounds so freaking boring, right? But let's think about it. What's more likely to last the next 25 years? An AI consulting startup you just created or a cleaning company? Probably a cleaning company, right? It sounds more boring, but when you build an asset once, it could actually last for a very long time. Like, I've had my LA location now for 11 years, which sounds crazy. And now I'm at the point where I probably do, I have a 1-hour meeting with my GM every week and maybe a couple things here and there. That's kind of it. It's been like that for a few years. I could envision this business lasting a very long time, and I want it to last a very long time. I built a very durable asset with this type of model. The beauty of the remote local model is that I could be in Africa while running that local business that has that durability part. So for me, the sexy aspect, like, isn't exactly the end product of business, because kind of what I've realized is, at least being in entrepreneurship this long, businesses are oftentimes similar in terms of the problems you're going to encounter. You're going to have personnel issues, you're going to have scaling issues, you have capital issues, all that kind of stuff is very similar. So really what we're talking about, the excitement factor is that last kind of 5%. And I remember I was talking to, it was a business coach, and I told him, hey, I want to start something else. I want to start a VA agency for Jehovah's Witnesses, because I have a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses in my team. So I was like, Jehovah's Witnesses as a service. This is going to be great. Like, we're going to have sales guys who are Jehovah's Witnesses. I got a whole crew of them. And he was like, dude, why are you doing this? And I was like, well, it sounds kind of fun. Like, I could do something unique and different. And like, I feel like I'm doing my business for a long time. And his answer was, dude, if you want excitement, go learn to surf. Like, just because you start another business, you don't have to get your excitement from another business. It's largely going to be the same. So do what you want to and get your entrepreneurial juice going with what you're currently doing, which probably make you more money. And then you could also find your fulfillment and excitement elsewhere. For some reason that clicked for me. And I was like, dude, you're totally right. Like, why am I pinning excitement on my business? It doesn't have to do that. That's a lot of pressure to have the most exciting business, where most of entrepreneurship is kind of just being in the trenches.
Yeah, I like that insight. It reminds me of this like old man river archetype that Ian and I came up, we like wrote down a list. We like inventoried all the like wealthy people that we personally know. And Old Man River is the most common form of wealthy person, which is like durable, established business, making multi-hundred thousands a year, if not more. Finding ways to both be in and out of the business. So Old Man River often is the person that is doing things in the week that you find them at a golf course or a racetrack, or they're at the gym at 2 p.m. on Wednesday doing bench press or something. And they're cash flowing, but then they get jacked up about something. They listen to a podcast like this, they dive back in and they get their excitement by retooling something and building up that cash flow. And then there's always like parlay opportunities. Like you had one, like you have an Old Man River business, you're making great cash flow. And then there's this beautiful parlay where you're like, well, I've kind of got three options here. I can franchise, I can scale, or I can coach it. You know, you could be like, I've made this model, now I'm going to teach others how to make this model. And those are beautiful, elegant parlays. And so there's typically going to be something that's not like tangential, but that's like right directly involved in your industry that's going to present itself as a way to get to that next level, even if it starts out looking relatively simple.
I'm in DC Black now, and literally yesterday we had our mastermind call, and that was a big conversation, which was around, the people in my group who started another business, which wasn't tangentially related to their existing business. Every single one of them regretted it. Like, why did I do this? This was just a headache and it didn't make sense. But when you're kind of in the game with the business, you can now see opportunities with what to do with your extra capital for what you want. Exactly like you said, Dan. Like, I think DC is the perfect example of it. You guys originally started this incredible community, and now there's a lot of offshoots that come from that, right? And you could get excitement from doing that type of thing still within your core model. It's the same with cleaning, which is a boring old school business model. We started doing Airbnb turnovers. Now you could get into the software side of it. You could start your own cleaning marketing agency. You could get into franchising. You could roll up cleaning companies. You could roll up window cleaning companies so you could cross-sell them. There's so many things you could do when you're inside, and you could oftentimes just get your excitement from that.
I agree. And it's almost like, and this is a good seg to our next topic, which is I kind of want to talk about how you think about hustle life mix, how you organize your days, because you're a big lifestyle guy, but yet you have this incredible scaling enterprise on your hands as well. And, it really is a superpower for the Old Man River path to wealth. And just to clarify for the listeners, there's a lot of different ways to get wealthy, but one of the most common ways is to start a boring business and just own it for 20 years and make big money and have your write-offs and apply your knowledge, learn from it. And voila, 10 years later, you're wealthy. The Old Man River type, I don't know why I call it Old Man River.
I love this. This is great.
Most of these folks are, older than me. And I something about it, I admire it. It's an admiring nickname. It's meant to be playfully boring. It's like, look how simple this was. Like no TechCrunch write-up required. And they are going on these vacations. They are on a plane. They are doing all this stuff, but they're doing it in this very rote, simple, one foot in front of the other way. Yet, it is the time that this persona spends away from their business that I think can re-energize and cross-pollinate. And you can get excited about things like when you're surfing or whatever and dive back in. It doesn't have to be every single day. You can make a few key decisions every year that completely change the business. And the reason is that you have a scale factor. So when you go surfing and you come back with the roll-up idea, you've really thought it through, you've run it through the mastermind, business coach, everything. You make the announcement to the team, you've got the plan, you've worked on it through countless sessions of surfing, and you're ready to go, and you make one or two moves a year. And that can be a way to be an effective entrepreneur.
It's interesting what you said. I think I probably heard Alex Hormozy or someone else say this, or someone way smarter than me. But at some point in your entrepreneurial journey, you are now paid off your decision-making, not your productivity. You don't quite know when that happens, right? At some point, it just flips. But at some point, like we're so used to bootstrapping stuff and grinding, you think you need 8 hours a day to do stuff, where you look at it and a lot of the value is created on key decisions. So if you find yourself in that realm, then you realize that as long as you can keep yourself mentally sharp, which means don't burn out, make sure you have a good life, get networked, read books, stay sharp, you can make these key decisions which change the enterprise value of your business. Now, I think people will say, cool, I'm gonna do that in year one, Neel. Like that sounds great. I'm gonna be the visionary. Like I'm gonna hire people to do this. I'm just gonna be the philosopher thinker. It doesn't work that way. You kind of got to earn the rights for it and become Old Man River. But I agree, like Old Man River has a lot more opportunity in front of him because of what he's built and, you know, his prowess and his decision-making process and the fact that he already has something running that it's going to be very easy to roll up other stuff.
Very cool. Well, Neel, let's give a shout out to your pod here at the end. Is there anything you want to mention to founders? Is there anything we want to touch on?
You could find me online on X. MaidThis Franchise is the name of the company.
Your X account's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
And your podcast is good too. It is Be Remote Local. You rebranded the pod, right?
I did. So it's called the Freedom Formula now. So I typically interview people who've achieved time, location, or financial freedom and just kind of reverse engineer how they got there. So it's usually interview style, short 20-minute episodes. So definitely check that out too.
Cool. Well, Neel Parekh, man, I appreciate your time. It's always great to get the opportunity to speak with you, and congratulations on success with the franchise formula. I'm assuming if any listeners have questions about how they could duplicate a franchise, they can reach out to you on X and see what's up.
I'll be on there. Thanks for having me, Dan.